All right, good afternoon, everybody. So we are at the top of the hour, so I think we'll kick things off. So before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. So at the moment, everyone is in listen-only mode. Unfortunately, you'll have to listen to me for the next hour. You'll see Anthony and Amin are on this slide deck with their contact details, but unfortunately they won't be joining me on this webinar. But you know what it's like with us engineers, we typically do all of the hard work anyway. So so they've left me to my own devices. So yeah, so hopefully this will be a good one. So there's a couple of ways you can interact with myself and with the other participants on today's webinar. You've got the chat function, so you can talk to all attendees, or you can just chat directly with myself. Because we don't have anyone doing the secondary person from Ekahau, I may miss some of the chat or the Q&A. So that's why the Q&A is quite good, because if you do have a question, people can upvote it or downvote it, depending on how important it is. So once we get through some of these slides, we'll pause and I'll have a quick look and see if there's anything pressing that we should be addressing. Because you know, keeping these things interactive is fantastic, rather than me just talking in a vacuum. Lastly, we will send out a recording of today's webinar as well. So you know, normally that'll take a day or two. We'll get that out to everyone that's registered, even if they couldn't attend. And the most likely place for that will be our YouTube page, but we will send out an email reminder for that as well. Thanks, Roy. Good to hear that people can see me and hear me. That's always fantastic. Okay, so just a quick look at the agenda for today as well. So you know, the primary purpose for this webinar was around customization in Ekahau. So a lot of that is going to be built around generally predictive design. So you know, the webinar was customizing Ekahau for enhanced survey and design accuracy, and I'm a strong believer in that getting the predictive design done first and being done correctly will make the rest of your workflow, no matter what part of the Wi-Fi design life cycle you're in, much easier. So that's what the focus of today's webinar is. But we're going to have a couple of other bits and pieces thrown in as well. Obviously, we want to give an update on what Ekahau Asia Pacific have been doing. We'll cover all the customization elements to a varying degree. And then we're going to do a live demo. So we'll show you some of the screenshots that I've taken for the custom elements. And then we'll do a Q&A. And if it's anything like last time, I suspect that we'll be inundated with questions. So, you know, again, use the Q&A or the chat window to do that, please. Okay, so really quick snapshot of Ekahau, in case anyone wasn't on our previous webinar or haven't joined a webinar before. For the APAC region, we have a sales base in Sydney and in Singapore, and we've recently just put a new headcount on in Japan as well, which I'll show you on the next slide. I'm based out of the Gold Coast, so I'm up in Queensland, but my role does cover Asia Pacific. Anthony's role covers Asia Pacific as well, and Amin will cover Australia and New Zealand. Okay, oh, and there we go. There's so our new headcount in Japan is Shigeru Inoka. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Shigeru. And so he is the Channel and Alliances Manager. So that's probably the big news around the headcount for Ekahau. The key element that I want to emphasize here is Ekahau's investment in the Asia Pacific region. At the start of last year, Anthony was the only headcount in the region. And since that time, you know, we've put on, you know, an engineering role. We've put on an ANZ channel sales role, and the same in the Japan region as well. So, you know, we are growing, we are expanding, and, you know, Ekahau are looking to invest in this region as well. And running these webinars in a timely fashion. If you went to last year's Wi-Fi Design Day, you probably would have seen a few discussions around having localized webinars, that aren't at 3 in the morning and things like that. And, they're always really good, and we like to be able to watch them, after the fact, but it's always good to have a live webinar as well, where we can do a Q&A. So, I quite like doing those, as hopefully you guys do as well. Okay, so what's coming up with Ekahau? So the one I'm most excited about is Cisco Live. So that'll be kicking off next week, and that's where we're all going to be. Well, at least 3/4 of the team. I don't believe Shigera will be down there, but myself, Anthony, and Amin will be there. So it's going to be a fun event. I think it's going to be a really good, really big event. We've got a lot of bits and pieces planned. We are going to have a lot of Ekahau swag. So I've got a series of hats, hoodies, a few giveaways as well. So please come by the booth, have a chat to us about Ekahau, about good Wi-Fi design, about good validation practices. We would love for you to come up and have a chat with us. And we might give you some of our swag as a bit of a thank you. The other thing that we're going to do during Cisco Live is we're actually going to do a live webinar from Cisco Live. So that's going to be on the 6th, which will be the Wednesday. We're going to do that at 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon. And that time is late in the day because it is early morning in Finland, if that's a bit of a hint at what we're trying to line up with there. The other thing I want to talk about is we've got some ECSC classes coming up. So we do have a Melbourne class happening the week after Cisco Live. So that's, I think that's pretty close to capacity, if not already. So, if you are looking to get involved there, please reach out to the team at Dicadata. We do also have a Gold Coast class happening in April as well. And then you can see we're rolling out the ECSC course into the remaining APAC region as well. So, particularly we haven't held one in Japan, so we are going to pencil one in for Japan, and we've had quite a few queries for that particular country. And we also had a successful India ECSC in Bangalore in February, so earlier this month. And there's already been a lot of really positive buzz around that, and they're already looking to host another one in August. So, if you are looking to jump onto the ECSC, please talk to us or talk to the team at DICA. It's always good to get feedback on where we should be hosting the next ECSC as well. We typically we target Melbourne and Sydney for most of the Australia-based ECSCs, but we would definitely like to hear from anyone, if they think that there's any other areas in Australia, so any other major cities or any other countries that they think there'd be a lot of interest in. The last thing I want to talk about is the Dicadata are having a one-day Ekahau hands-on. So there's got a list of dates there. If you want to sign up, you can go to the URL. I might just paste that into the chat. I'll post them in actually. So you can go to the URL and have a look there. Otherwise, let me send this to everyone. So that should be in there now. And so you've got all the dates there. Now, the nice thing with this is that we will be giving out temporary license keys for Ekahau to use on the day. So if you're not an existing user of the tool, please come along, come down, bring your laptop. You'll be able to install a full, version of Ekahau, and you'll get some really good hands-on training or some hands-on time with the tool. And we'll go through, we'll be covering Wi-Fi and best practices and how to best optimize and use the tool. A quick question while I was typing that into the chat is around if there are any courses more advanced than ECSC. We are, just watch that space is what I should probably say there. So keep an eye on that. Okay, so customization in Ekahau. So really the key focus of this is what elements we can customize. And so, the focus is on getting the design correct, like I mentioned at the top of the webinar. And it's usually built around the predictive design. for the most part. There are some elements that can be applied to a live survey, like an on-site active survey as well. But we're going to really build this around the predictive design right now, and then we'll probably we'll get into the Sidekick side of things a little bit later on. So elements that you can customize, and probably the biggest element that I've customized in the past for Wi-Fi design is the walls, and so they really like the sort of the base requirement for all predictive design. But you can also customize attenuation areas. You can customize coverage requirements, devices, so specific devices outside of the standard ones included with the tool, as well as device usage. So what is the device actually doing on the network as well? So, is it streaming video? Is it just associated to the network? Is it running voice calls? Things like that. So, my approach to this is generally to create a new project file. So if you create a new project file, you can, and it's entirely blank, you can create these custom elements in the project file. And then what I normally do is I would save that as a template. And then I would open the template as I need it. When I need to do it, you can open it as a template, or you can merge it in. And then obviously you want to save as, whatever the new customer project would be, or whatever the new project is you're working on. So you don't save over that existing template. But in practice, it actually works really, really well. So someone's asking why nothing in Queensland, which I'm guessing relates to the ECSC. We do have the Gold Coast class in April, so you definitely have a look at that. Again, this is why we like to get that sort of feedback. We do log the feedback that we receive. So if we're getting a lot of people asking for like a Brisbane-based course, yeah, absolutely, we'll look to we'll look to host one there. We find that the Sydney and the Melbourne classes they sell out so quickly and then there's people asking, when can you run another one in that region? So that's where we tend to focus our efforts on. Okay, so customization prerequisites. So look, this is probably the most boring slide you've ever seen, but the content is what I really want to focus on. So it's really about understanding what the customer requirements are. So, if we look at, okay, what the business requirement is, it's really about what type of network. So, is it a voice network? Is it a data network? Is it a high density network? What is the requirement going to be here? When we talk about environmental type, so, like what vertical is it going to be in? So, is it a warehouse? Maybe it's going into healthcare, education, enterprise. Maybe it's outdoor. Maybe it's a combination of, one of those verticals, like a warehouse with an outdoor environment as well. What are these scoped areas? So, what is in and out of scope? Usually customers, if they're not sure, they're going to come back with, the Wi-Fi 101 of, I want everywhere covered. Now, the only problem with having coverage, across the entire site is the cost is going to increase exponentially. And in a lot of cases, particularly if we were, say, designing for high density, there's no need for high density in areas, like server rooms and things like that, where there's probably going to be a very limited amount of client devices. So that needs to be really scoped out. So next up would be device types. So, not only what technology the device is utilizing. So, is it an AX device, which are, they're starting to be announced now. Is it AC, is it N, is it maybe an older, like a B dinosaur type device? And then is it a laptop? Is it a tablet? Is it a smartphone? Maybe it's some proprietary piece of equipment. So, it might be something that, it's a vertical specific equipment. So it might be like a wireless X-ray machine in a hospital environment, for example, which I have seen. And, a piece of equipment that probably costs, several $100,000. But, the Wi-Fi, the integrated Wi-Fi unit was an 11G. And it was pretty poor performing type of device. And also, what are the device capabilities? We should probably also cover that as well. So, can it utilize channel bonding in any way? So, if we can utilize channel bonding, absolutely. In a lot of cases, particularly if we're going with high density, we may not be able to utilize it just because of the channel reuse. Next would be application use. So, are we talking about voice application? Are we doing large file transfers? Are we doing video conferencing? So, right now I'm doing a voice and video application or a video conference. So that's going to utilize more bandwidth than if I was just associated to the network, typing up some emails to the other Ekahau team members in Asia Pacific, for example. And then capacity requirements. So, Ekahau Site Survey does have a capacity planner, so we can determine, okay, what is the number of devices, what are the number of users, and, we might need to do some detective work there, work out what we expect the average number of people is going to be in a particular area, and then make an assumption based on the number of devices that they are going to have. The key there is to work out concurrent device usage. So there might be, and airports are a good example where, it's highly public, and, there might be several thousand people in a particular area, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every single person that may be utilizing the guest Wi-Fi is on the network at any one time. And so, we don't need to, ramp up the, the expected client number quite so much. But, if we're utilizing, let's say like a stadium environment where we're having sporting events or concert events, there might be a higher requirement for concurrent device usage, but because people are trying to use social media to take, photos and images and videos and upload them, download them, stream and do all that sort of stuff as well. All right, so coverage requirements. So you can see I've created Grant Super Awesome Wi-Fi. It's pretty similar to some of the other vendor specifics that we've got in Ekahau, but you can access this by the project coverage requirements option. And this is something that I don't see a lot of customization in when I've had project files come across my lap, and people are asking, why am I getting a certain issue, or can you assist with this? It's always good to have a look. And so it is worthwhile setting the right coverage plan. So again, it comes back to determining those requirements from the customer. But again, if the customer doesn't know or they don't understand Wi-Fi, coming and asking them, okay, what sort of signal strength do you need? That's probably not something that the customer is going to necessarily be able to give you. The nice thing is that most vendors will have guidelines, and so, for instance, you'll have vendor guidelines from the AP manufacturer. So you might have a vendor guideline from Cisco or Aruba or Ruckus or someone like that. Or you may also have something from the vendor itself. So the person that manufactures the phone. So whether it might be Apple or it might be SpectraLink or something like that, they may have guidelines on deploying their device into the enterprise. And so you can utilize both of those and sort of combine the elements from both to create your own custom requirement. Okay, so custom wall and attenuation. So this is what I've used most in the past. One thing that I often recommend people do is, if you have a quick look online, and I was looking for it last night, I couldn't find it, but I used to have a little guide that gave me the architectural cross sections of walls, and it was really, really good for being able to identify like brick and concrete and windows and gyprock, smoke and firewall, things like that. So it's ideal, if you can try and find something like that, because it does allow you to look at a floor plan, and you can automatically work out, particularly when you've spent a lot of time with floor plans, what different materials are, because often that can be a difficult process as well. Now, if we're going on site, then obviously we're able to work out some of the attenuation values for ourselves, and what may look like gyprock, from the floor plan may not necessarily attenuate like the gyprock that's that's standard in Ekahau Site Survey, and so forth. So ideally what we want to do is we want to go to site. We're going to pop up an access point, and we're going to take our trusty sidekick, and we're going to do, I prefer to do a stop and go survey. So you might want to set the stop and go surveys for like a 30-second period of time, so you get a nice average. And the reason why the AP on a stick approach is ideal is because you're utilizing an enterprise AP. The enterprise AP is going to be, wall or ceiling mounted. However, the access point is intended to be mounted, and you are and you're operating at static power levels. So ideally, you don't want to use an access point that is already in the site, because it's probably on dynamic power. It may also be shifting channels and things like that. Most enterprise APs have got an AP on a stick or a site survey mode where you can set it to static levels, and away you go. So we can take a measurement in the room with the AP, and then what we can do is we can go to the other side of the wall, and we can measure the attenuation of that wall, and we can work out the difference. So if you have a look at the screenshot for the smoke wall that I've got there, the entry on the left hand side is basically saying that we're at 6 dB difference in attenuation, so from one side of the wall to the other, and then we've measured the thickness of the wall. So bring a tape measure, or whatever measuring instrument you would like. Some people are lucky enough to have laser sights and things like that when they do this quite often. And so you can work out the thickness of the wall, and then from there you can sort of mark that on your map by using the difference in signal strength visualization. So you can offset one survey to the other. So we've got a couple of questions here. And the questions are a little bit all over the place. So I will come back to those, because I'm not sure exactly where they were in the scheme of things. I think they've come through at previous slides. So the other thing that I would recommend is, so if you are interested in an AP on a stick approach, Ekahau's own Nick Turner did a blog post, there it is in the chat, about an AP on a stick. So check that out, have a look, and away you go. But ideally you want something like a Sidekick on site while you're doing these sort of measurements. The pros of using the Sidekick in this scenario is that it is the same type of device, across the board. So you're not going to get any differences between users, which is fantastic. And ideally, you're going to have the Sidekick orientated the same way. So I was on site with a customer at one point, and they were shielding the Sidekick with their body on one measurement, and then they weren't on the other. So they were mixing up which way they were facing the wall. So in this case, you can see I've got the Sidekick facing the access point basically in both pictures there, and so that is by design as well. Okay, so custom device and custom usage. So I've created a couple of different elements here. Now I've got another website to share with you guys, and this one is very, very interesting. It was just pointed out to me by the Ekahau guys in the US, and it is really, really good. So it's called RSSI Compared, and it actually has an entire section on Sidekick offset. So you can work out, so if you do your survey with your Sidekick, you can enter some values in, and you can say, okay, well, this is what it's going to look like from the point of view of a modern smartphone, or of a tablet, of a laptop, things like that. It is community driven. So, if you're in the position to be able to compare, your Sidekick to another device, absolutely, we can get those details added into the website. You just have to create a login and away you go. But with custom device usage, and so the reason that I mentioned that website is because those values are actually taken from a smartphone that's only a couple of years old, and you can see that there's a huge variation. And this is an AC capable smartphone, but the average offset was -18, I think is what it's reading there. Yeah, -18, which is quite significant, right? So that is quite a difference. So you might do an active survey with your Sidekick, and you may actually think that you've got enough coverage, but then if you offset the there's the signal by -18, there's obviously going to be some problems there as well. I think we've covered everything there. So the last thing I wanted to say was, so always plan from the worst performing device, if possible. You know, if we've got some old 11B devices that are on the network, I mean, you know, ideally the conversation I would try and have would be, do we really need these devices on the network? You know, can we replace them? Can we get something a little bit more modern? But if that's not the case, then absolutely we need to, you know, we'll need to try and plan for those 11B devices if they are critical for the network. All right, so let's get into a live demo. We'll see what we can do here. We just stop this share and we'll get everything switched over. And so while we're in the midst of this, please ask any questions that you might have. I'll just have a quick look at the questions here. So I've got a couple of questions about if the classes are changeable, chargeable. Yes, the classes are. I don't have the pricing on me right now. So what I would do, what I would ask is send an email to me, and I can. So I've just answered that with my email address. So it's grant.shelley@ekahau.com. I've answered the question about the more advanced courses, so please keep an eye on that. We'll have something to talk about fairly soon. ECSC courses planned for Japan. Yes, I believe August was when we were looking to plan that. So there we go, August. And some of the other ones, is there any fixed attenuation of different types of walls? So I'm not 100% sure what the question is there, but we'll kick on with the demo because I'm sure everyone else is getting restless. Yes, we haven't had an ECSC in Perth yet. I would love to have one in Perth, and I love going to Perth. So it would be fantastic to host one there if we could do it. Okay, so let's bring this back up. Let's bring this demo back up. Okay, so I appreciate everyone bearing with me while I'm writing solo and answering questions at the same time. Okay, so at the moment I've got a blank survey project here, so it's just been launched. So what we're going to do is I'm going to open, and I've created basically I've created what I've just called custom template. So if I just open this up, we'll work through the different custom elements that I created, and then we'll go through and we'll create a project based out of that. So if we go up to project, this is where we can create a lot of this custom design. So click on coverage requirements, and we've got my super awesome Wi-Fi in here. We've got other defaults in here as well. And I've made my Wi-Fi the default. If we go into device profiles, we've got, normally you would get just generic everything basically. So you have a generic laptop, smartphone, tablet, hand scanner, things like that. I've just created an enterprise voice phone, a dinosaur device, and a modern smartphone. And I've created all of those based off RSSI compared. But the defaults that you get in Ekahau, it's not really a knock on them. They're actually really quite good. But if you want to get a little bit more granular and a little bit more accurate in your design, then it's definitely worthwhile going out and gathering your own as well. We've also got a custom phone profile. So in this case, we're doing Netflix, Spotify, Dropbox, and we're doing some background syncing. So there's some sort of heavy usage there. If we go down the dinosaur profiles, just doing email and Wi-Fi calling and some background sync. And we've also got, where are we? We've got a VoIP profile as well, which is just doing background and VoIP as well. And so, you know, there is a multitude of different options that we've got in here. We have grabbed these from, you know, from the vendors themselves as well. So what we can do is let's open up a CAD file. So again, you know, if you were on the last webinar, you probably would have seen this file before. But you know, consistency is good as well. Yes, there will be a recording sent at the end of this for the person that's asking. Yes, you can customize user profiles or device profiles, I should say. So if we go with doors, and this was what I didn't show you, but I did create some custom wall types as well. And so they're in here. So I've just put a little, you know, a dot at the start of that so that they're right up the top. And so now I can easily select like my heavy door. We can keep the elevator. We've got exterior walls, so exterior concrete. And I've made these deliberately quite heavy, AU drywall. And we've got tinted windows here, and we can hit import. Now, keep in mind, I have made these up, so don't copy them and expect that they're going to be accurate, that they're going to be able to create you the ultimate design plan or anything like that. Again, I recommend going out and getting your own, determining your own custom walls. So similar to what I explained before. And so we can create a quick design. We're going to create this as an area. And so if you haven't seen Ekahau before, you've sort of jumped into the thick of it. You know, the customization is relatively straightforward, and I will show what that looks like. We should have some time to do that. But what I can do here is once I've created the area, I can name it. So, you know, this might be like A block, for example, like it might be. I can set its own coverage requirement. So I can have requirements within requirements, but I'm going to keep it the same. And then I can add some devices. In this case, you know, I'm going to add my my voice phone, my dinosaur, and my modern smartphone, and then I can define what those devices are actually going to do on the network. So in this case, what did we select? We selected enterprise voice. So we've got a VoIP profile, and it'll tell me, okay, what the bitrate requirement would be. We've got a dinosaur profile for the dinosaur, and then we've also got a custom phone profile. And, you know, we might bump these up just a little bit, right? Pardon me. And then we can just hit close. So you'll see here, it's now renamed A block, Grand Super Awesome Wi-Fi, when we've got 300 devices applied here. Now we could go through and manually place APs. So, you know, we could just select a, you know, like a, you know, whatever AP is in here and go to the coverage planning option. This is probably one of my favorite features to show off because we can almost in real time understand what the primary cell coverage looks like. So if we put the AP, and hopefully you can see that, I might just make this a little bit bigger for everyone. So I know all of the colors for the walls are pretty dark, but if we put it in the elevator shaft, you can see there that it's just going to cause all sorts of problems. If we shift it out, then it'll be a little bit better. So, you know, we could place access points in this type of manner. For example, and then, you know, bring up signal strength. All right. So, you know, we can do something like that. So manual placement, absolutely. But the nice thing with the auto planner, which we're going to select now, is it will incorporate our requirements as well, which is quite nice. So we can go into configure. We've got the same devices that we defined before, and we can untick that as well. So, you know, if we are planning for capacity, so if you're doing, you know, something, obviously, you know, we're just doing a single block of, you know, what I understand is a multi-level building with the elevator and the stairwells being the key giveaway. But if we were planning for a stadium, for example, you know, we're going to need some sort of a capacity estimate to work that out as well. We can utilize the capacity planner here to do that. So, you know, we can define transmit power, antenna height, the unibands that we're going to use. So my software is configured for Australia. So anyone that's in other regions of APAC, you know, we can change the regulatory domain on the software, and it will open up those block channels that may be available in your region. And then, you know, we can define a couple of other elements as well, which can tie in with like airtime utilization and things like that. But let's just hit create, and we'll get a baseline to work with. Okay. So we ended up with quite a number of APs. So we ended up with 46 access points across this entire design, which is considerable. And we've got actually a lot. We've got a lot of APs with the 2.4 radio disabled. So the software will do that. It will also try and avoid hallways, and you can see there it will intelligently identify hallways. We've got one down the bottom here, but that's really it. So it's not too bad. We've got a couple of disabled 2.4 radios up in here because we've got an access point on the bottom right here on channel 1. We've got another 2 on channel 6 and 11. So, you know, any additional 2.4 radio in this area would just be, you know, would just be a lot of channel overlap and a lot of contention. So we can, from here, we can bring up like we've got a couple of different metrics that we can work with. So we've got like airtime utilization, for example, where the software will estimate, okay, well, let's spread those 300 devices out across the entire area that we defined and across both radios. And, you know, we can get some statistics here, or, you know, we can hover the mouse over and get some tooltips on what's actually happening, like how the calculation is being determined. And so we can report on a lot of this, on a lot of these elements as well. So we've got airtime utilization, and so we've got 5 gig, we've got 2.4. Now, the reason 2.4 is looking a lot healthier is because we don't have as many 2.4 specific devices. So, you know, we had a lot more dual band devices, and most of those devices will be pushed to the 5 gig band as well. So more devices on there. If we go with so clients per AP, we can sort of have a look at that as well. So, you know, nothing really causing too much of an issue here at the moment. And so we've got a couple of other ones, capacity health. So, you know, everything looks pretty good right now. So the nice thing we can do here is we can exclude areas, but in this case, I'm going to add a second area. And so in this case, what we might do is we might say, well, you know, we've got, I don't know, let's just say we've got a lecture theatre. And so we could say that, that this room here is a lecture theatre. And so what we're going to do is, you know, we can put in very high density area 1. Oops. We've still got my super awesome Wi-Fi requirement, and we're going to add the same 3 device types. So a voice phone, a dinosaur, and a smartphone. Sounds like a joke. A voice phone, a dinosaur, and a modern smartphone walked into a bar. But let's get this. Well, we don't need 1,000. And then we're going to assign their profile as well. So we've got our VoIP profile, we've got our dinosaur profile, and then we've got our smartphone. So we're going to add all devices in there. So, you know, in this case, basically, you know, maybe an all hands meeting gets called, and that means every device is going to be in this one area. And maybe we'll shade this area a little bit different. We'll make it blue, so you can really show it off. Okay, so let's go back to utilization. So any guesses as to what's going to happen? While we're waiting for that, a couple of questions in here. So 2.4 looks all right. And we switch over to 5 gig where we know that there was a heavier device profile, and we've got some problems. So, you know, if we want to have a look at those problems, again, we can look at the statistics, but we can also look at the tooltips as well, and we can see there that we're at 100% airtime, and it's basically the smartphones that are chewing up all of that airtime. If we look at the okay, well, what application? It's the Dropbox download. So, you know, we can look at that and we can simulate that and we can understand, well, okay, look, there's a particular application that's going to cause this type of problem. Again, this is assuming that we're going to have all devices, so all 100 devices concurrently downloading. Now, some file sharing applications have got like smart sync type technology, but if everyone was trying to do a large download at once in that room, absolutely the Wi-Fi would start to fall over. It would definitely have some problems there. You know, it's even so bad that we can see it causing a problem with an access point that's not even in the direct area, but we know that, or we're simulating that some devices will be associating to that access point, and so that will also fail as a result. So any questions so far? We're sort of going through it pretty good. We've had a couple of good questions. So that's sort of what I wanted to cover, a lot of that on the customization front, and just to give you a bit of an idea on you know, these topics are going to start fairly broad, and then, you know, as we sort of move forward, we will we'll move into more of a specialized topics. But, you know, if we contrast the airtime utilization metric that we were just looking at, and we had failure, let's bring it back to signal strength, because you know, a lot of design tools or a lot of Wi-Fi reports, they always include a heat map, and then a lot of non-Wi-Fi people, they want the heat map. They want to know that, okay, green means good, red means bad, and so, you know, if I ran a report on this and I didn't include airtime utilization, or maybe I didn't capacity plan, like I didn't, you know, go through my questionnaire with the customer to start with and understand what devices are on the network, what are they going to be doing, then this network actually looks quite good. But, you know, the minute they have their meeting, they, you know, they've got a high density area up in the top right here. Someone does a Dropbox upload and everyone starts downloading, the network falls over. Well, you know, the Wi-Fi is going to be the culprit. It looks bad for the person that would commission the work, that did the install. It looks bad with the vendor as well, because it looks like the vendor, you know, can't, you know, isn't suitable. So there's a whole myriad of, like, sort of a domino effect type of approach with, you know, with taking a high level and simplistic signal strength equals a good, green, and and prosperous network. So definitely you want to be building these sort of metrics in, even if you're not creating custom devices. So if we're going into devices here and we're just using the generics, which we've got, so generic smartphone, generic tablet, barcode scanner, VoIP phone, and laptop, even if you're just using those, at least something is running a capacity analysis across the network. Let's try and understand what's going on here. Usually if I'm doing a design, if I come across areas that look to be high density, again, it's something that the question should have been asked with the customer, but if the customer's not sure and you see a meeting room, it's probably worth just running a small simulation and saying, okay, well, the meeting room looks so big, we assume that there's probably going to be, say, 12, 15 or 20 people at most in this meeting room. Is it going to meet a capacity requirement? And sometimes it may mean that we need to have an additional access point placed, in that area. And so, if we were going to do something like that, what we could do is, we've got all of our access points listed down the side here. Let's say we need to place another AP. So, again, I'm placing this access point smack bang in the middle of the room. So, bear with me based on realism here. And we're using, 5 omnidirectional access points in the one room. So again, bear with me here. But we can put a note on here. Say, very high density requirement for that AP. And now the cool thing is here is we can actually use this search bar. We just have to type in VHD, so very high density, and we will find that access point. So, pardon me. So when it comes to putting your report and your bill of materials together, it makes it very, very easy to separate out different AP types and, to put them into a table to create that bill of materials for the customer so that they can quickly and easily see, okay, well, I can see where the very high density APs and what ones they are, where they need to go. All right, so I probably talked more than enough on this particular topic. Let's open it up for some questions. And I see, that there's some questions in there. Okay, so what do you mean by a dinosaur? Basically, I mean that it is a really old 802.11b device, basically. Networking Dojo is close to another company name. I'm not too sure about that. Probably speak to whoever owns. I think that's Dicker Data. So I think Darko, if you're on, have a chat about that. Yes, the session will be available after today. What is the best practice for placing APs that need to be placed within elevators in a multi-level building when building the predictive survey? This is a requirement in a lot of hospitality builds that we perform. Yeah, so normally what I would do is I would assume that the access point is going to be placed in the elevator carriage itself. I would not place it on a map, but I would include it separately in the bill of materials, because otherwise if you're trying to replicate what the cell coverage looks like, you're going to have this access point on every single floor, and so the bill of materials gets thrown out because it's going to look like there's an extra AP on every floor for that individual elevator shaft or elevator carriage. That's how I used to do it. There's a couple of other ways you can do it. You could place the AP on the first, like the ground of the basement floor in the elevator carriage, and then stipulate that these access points have not been replicated through the remaining floors because they are, they've been included on the basement or the ground floor level, and then draw an exclusion zone. So similar to what we've got here, exclusion area around the the corresponding elevator shafts, so you won't get any coverage in there. So that's one way to do it as well. Can we say Auto AP Planner is usually unreliable because of the sheer amount of AP proposed by Ekahau? So I get that question every now and then. What I always recommend is use the Auto Planner as a baseline, but it should always require an engineer's input as to whether the design is correct or not. So, you know, different elements that you add, there's a lot of moving parts in these predictive designs, will increase or decrease the AP count. You'll definitely have more APs if you're avoiding corridors and things like that. And so in some cases it is, you know, it's an option of, we can place one AP in this corridor and we can cover an area. We're probably going to, you know, have a little bit of co-channel interference, or we may need to place like 5 access points to cover off some of the rooms and the surrounding corridors. And sometimes it can literally just come down to a budget scenario. So, you know, again, don't be too quick to judge someone else's design. They may have had budget constraints that they had to adhere to as well. So, you know, again, corridor placement is not ideal, but in some cases it may be necessary to meet certain constraints on the design. So how has the regulatory domain changed or modified? It's basically as easy as, whoops, here, preferences, regulatory domain, and you can change it here to whatever you want. So last week I was in Japan, we just changed it to Japan. And then if we bring up the RTFM and we bring back here, you'll see I can now see channel 14. If we go back and change it to Australia, and we jump in here, I can only see up to channel 13. Yeah. All right, so we've had a couple of questions. I think we're up to date with the questions. So we're to tell Ekahau software that you will be installing Ekahau wall. You can change the orientation of the antenna. So the question was, is there a way to tell Ekahau software that you will be installing the AP on a wall as compared to a ceiling? Now, I should preface this by saying that try and follow the vendor guidelines as best as you can. A lot of omnidirectional access points, such as the ones that are in this design, are intended, and their antenna radiation pattern is intended to be mounted, you know, to the ceiling. So they are not vertical but horizontal placement. So you should always try and push for that type of a scenario, because if you've got a radiation pattern like so, and then you shift it sideways, it's going to be blasting into the roof and the floor below you. So it's going to cause a lot of co-channel interference. And it's not made to be mounted that way. So avoid it if you can. If you absolutely can't, or if you need to, you know, if you need to modify, you can shift the orientation here. So you've got an antenna tilt here. So you could shift it like 90 degrees or something like that if you wanted to. What was the fix on that specific HD meeting room? Did adding the extra AP fix the solution? I can't recall exactly what the fix was, but what I normally started to do after that is I typically tried to have an AP dedicated to meeting rooms, typically because it was a hospital environment. Usually meeting rooms are utilized and they've got video conferencing because they're conferencing to other hospitals, and you know, it's very interactive. You know, the modern hospitals are like that these days. So it just made sense to have a dedicated access point for those areas, and that usually was what would solve the issue. You know, those type of assumptions would be something that I would put in my report. So that would just be a part of my boilerplate text that would go to a customer. Would we assume most devices would to be on 5 gigahertz range when we're doing the tests in individual rooms? Yeah, so you can manipulate. You can manipulate that anonymous attendee. I'm not sure who that is, but you can manipulate that a little bit with band steering as well. In the probably the easiest way is to bring it up here. So you got band steering. You can manipulate a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, you know, for the most part, you're going to want to try and push as many devices as you can to the 5 gig band and have them operate on there. What is the best way of creating a seriously heavy wall? Been doing some work with underground Wi-Fi. Need to create lots of stone, 10 meter by 70 meter stone pillars. Wow. Okay. So that may actually be better off with an attenuation area. So the question was about creating a really heavy wall. So we're talking about like a 10 meter by 70 meter stone pillar. I actually created this earlier. So I've just got like a concrete pillar that I can draw in. So that might be something that's better off, that you might be better off to make. And so I just sort of made, I made that up. But if you can get out and measure what the attenuation is, then that should be able to get you to simulate it and maybe just create it as an attenuation wall. Okay, so say the ceiling is 4 meters high, should it be on the ceiling? So I feel like that's a follow-up. Okay, so the question is, so say the ceiling is 4 meters high, should it be on the ceiling instead? And so this is a follow-up to, you know, vertically versus horizontally mounting APs. So what I would do there is the default. Now, again, I'm going to go back to the auto planner because that's what we used for the most part in building this up, but you can do this with the access points as well, but that's what antenna height is for. So the antenna height is where is the AP placed, basically. So, you know, the default is 2.4 meters. That's typically what most office environments are for. And so, you know, yeah, if you had unusually high ceilings, absolutely. Keep in mind that's a blanket approach. So every AP is going to be 2.4 meters. So generally you're better off to take that approach to start with. You know, if the majority of the access points are at that 2.4 meter height, and then when you get to specific areas, maybe you've got a couple of outdoor areas or there's some atriums, for example, like in a hotel, that's where you can place access points at a higher height by selecting the AP, actions, edit, and you can change the height here. So you can select multiple APs if you wanted to in this scenario as well. So you could group a bunch of APs together. They've all got, you know, VHD for very high density, and you can do a bulk update and set their height at 4 meters and see what the simulation looks like there. How can I export a survey map out of Ekahau so I can print it to take to a client? So for a PDF or a JPEG. So there's a couple of options. Now keep in mind, we've only got like a minute left, but we do have the questions really coming in now. So reports, you've got a one-click report, you've got template reports, and you've got the ability to export an image. So the image export is probably ideal for what you're looking for now. If you just want the map, export image, it will export as a PNG or a JPEG. One-click reports, you can export a whole series of data into a docx or a PDF format. I normally recommend send it into a doc format because you might want to tinker with it a little bit, but you know, you can put your headers and footers and things in there. And then there's custom reporting, which you know, we've had some good feedback. We're going to do that on another webinar at some point. But yeah, that's what we'd like to do there. How many minimum people attending ECSC in Seoul? So the class is usually, I believe it's 14 or 15 at the absolute max. That's what the That's what the absolute maximum for the ECSC classes are. And Joel had a follow-up question, so I'm not sure what. So will that additional AP be going to be on all the time? Okay, so I'm assuming you're talking about this additional AP here. In this case, yes, it will be. And so you're probably talking about the 2.4 radio would be definitely conflicting with the other access point down here. So if I place this AP, now keep in mind when I place an AP by default, the AP will choose channel 1 and channel 36. That's just what I've got it set as a default. Normally I would run the channel planner here and the channel planner would fix it. But if I've just placed one, what I can do is I can select it here and I can switch it off. You'll see now that's switched off. Oh, okay. In the meeting room, I would always leave the access point on all the time. Absolutely, and use a good channel plan, and and good radio management to approach that. All right, so we've just ticked over the hour. I do appreciate everyone attending today. We've had a bunch of questions. We will absolutely have a recording of this session. We'll have it out and hopefully up on our YouTube page very, very soon. And hopefully attached to that, I am trying to get included an invite to our next webinar, which is actually going to be next week, but on the Wednesday. It is going to be later in the afternoon for Australia, but we are going to be running it directly from Cisco Live. So it's going to be really good. If you are at Cisco Live, please come by our stand and say hi. Like I said, we do have some Ekahau swag that we are looking to offload. It has been sitting in my office for weeks now, and I'm looking to get rid of it. But yeah, please come by, say hi, have a chat. Even if you're an existing Ekahau user, come by and say hi. We're going to have some cool stuff to show you guys as well, which hopefully we will be talking about very, very soon as well. And remember, keep in mind the time of that webinar, it will be 5:30 p.m. so Melbourne time, and we're doing it later in the day, so it does sync up well with a certain other country. So yeah, we won't say any more about that. All right, thank you everyone. We might end it there. We'll talk to you all next time. Bye.